Right beneath the Waldorf Astoria, hidden within the maze of tunnels that weave through Manhattan like veins, there lies a stretch of track few New Yorkers have ever known. No nameplate, no ticket counter, no public entrance, only a bed of cold steel, buried beneath the most luxurious basement in the city. They call it Track 61. A rail line built more than a century ago was first meant only to store and refuel trains. But its location, directly beneath the Waldorf Astoria, gave it another kind of life. If Grand Central is the heart of New York, then Track 61 is its hidden vein, a place where power once moved quietly through the dark. A massive elevator connects the railbed to the hotel's basement, strong enough to lift an entire limousine to the surface. And from there, the stories began to spread. A secret station, a passageway for those who did not wish to be seen. Today, that steel door remains locked. No light, no echo of wheels, only the scent of metal, the damp breath of the earth, and the slow rhythm of time itself. And tonight, we will step down there. We will listen to the city whisper beneath our feet, to understand why, at the glowing heart of New York, there is still one place that has never truly awakened. In the heart of Manhattan, where the streets intersect like the veins of a giant body, Grand Central Terminal stands, radiant and still. By day, thousands cross its great concourse, lifting their eyes to the blue vaulted ceiling painted with constellations of the zodiac. But few know that beneath those marble floors lies another world. A second city, warm, dim, alive. A world where steam, oil, and steel create the hidden heartbeat of New York. Grand Central is not just a station. It is a living machine. A two-layered organism where every gear, every rail, every conduit moves in perfect rhythm. When it was completed in 1913, it was a marvel of its time. The first station in the world powered entirely by electricity. No more coal smoke, no more hissing steam, only the dry, steady rhythm of machines breathing deep below the city. Above, sunlight pours through high glass windows. Announcements echo through the hall. Crowds move like tides, but descend a few dozen meters and another world begins. A labyrinth of tracks, storage rooms, electric chambers, and endless corridors. They call it the Yard, the place where trains go to rest. And within it, in the northeast corner beside Lexington Avenue, lies a hidden section called Lex Yard. Lex Yard is the true backstage of Grand Central. Here, trains are brought down to rest. They are repaired, refueled. Engineers move in the coarse hum of engines. Light never comes naturally. It glows from weary industrial bulbs that hang low above the dust. Concrete walls are covered in soot. Pipes stretch across the ceiling like the spine of a steel creature. The air is thick and warm, carrying carrying the scent of metal and the breath of heat. Beneath the bright concourse above, the machinery still breathes, as if the city itself has a soul beneath the ground. In the early 20th century, as New York expanded layer by layer, Lex Yard was built as a technical heart. It was connected directly to Grand Central's private powerhouse. All the station's energy was born there, carried through hundreds of cables that reached deep into Manhattan. The tracks of Lex Yard were not only for trains. They carried materials, parts, and supplies for the immense electrical network that kept the city alive. Seen from a blueprint, Lex Yard looked like a web of circuits. Each tunnel, each rail, each passage had its own purpose. Nothing wasted. Everything measured to the inch. The architects of the New York Central Railroad didn't just build a terminal. They built a second city beneath the first, an invisible structure that worked silently under the crowded streets. This two-level design, with passengers above and machinery below, turned Grand Central into a masterpiece of the modern age. It allowed hundreds of trains to move each day without expanding the ground. Manhattan could rise higher because Grand Central dug deeper. If the Grand Concourse is where the city speaks, then Lex Yard is where it breathes. In those early years, night shift workers said the sounds here were like the heartbeat of New York, steady, heavy, echoing through the steel. When the iron wheels stopped turning and the heat began to fade, the yard fell silent. They called that silence the city's sleep. In Lex Yard, everything was arranged with almost meditative precision. Rails, power lines, steel doors, all resting as if they had been there long before mankind entered the tunnels. The yellow light brushed across layers of metallic dust, glittering like stars fallen in reverse. Here, beneath Manhattan, the sky lay beneath your feet. Grand Central was the pride of an era that believed in industry, in order, and in human endurance. Lex Yard, the hidden chamber at its northeast edge, was the quiet heart of that pride. Unseen, uncelebrated, yet it kept the great machine above alive and relentless. Years later, that underground yard would become the beginning of another story. A single rail, branching away from the network beside Lex Yard. A track once meant only for storage, but destined to carry a secret no one in the city expected. In those early years, though, there was only heat, steel, and the stillness of a dream forming deep beneath the ground. At first, Track 61 carried none of the mystery it would later earn. It was nothing more than a service spur, a quiet sidetrack at the edge of Lex Yard, built for the technical work of Grand Central Terminal. Empty trains were brought here to refuel, to be repaired, and then they disappeared again into the dark. Everything happened quietly, precisely, like the breath of a great machine working beneath the skin of Manhattan. Grand Central was the pride of America then, a monument to progress, a station powered entirely by electricity, a symbol of an age that believed in engineering and speed. But behind the bright concourse, where thousands of travelers cross paths each day, there were shadows. And in those shadows, Track 61 worked in silence, receiving maintenance cars, carrying supplies to the powerhouse, waiting for its next task. No announcements, no signs, no one noticed. Then the city began to change its skin. By the late 1920s, Manhattan had entered its golden age of skyscrapers, and when the Waldorf Astoria was being rebuilt, a strange coincidence appeared. Beneath the new hotel site, a silent track was already waiting, Track 61, a forgotten piece of underground structure, resting in the most perfect place on the map of New York. In 1929, as the new Waldorf Astoria design was completed, the hotel management entered talks with the New York Central Railroad, the owner of Grand Central Terminal. What came out of those talks was something unprecedented. The hotel was granted permission to use the underground space beneath its building to create a private railway connection directly linked to Lex Yard. From that moment, private train cars belonging to the wealthy elite could stop directly beneath the hotel. Discreet, convenient, luxurious. In a city powered by light and iron, owning a private track beneath your hotel was the very peak of privilege. The idea was bold and extravagant, yet perfectly in tune with the spirit of 1920s New York. An age of confidence, of opulence, and ambition. People didn't just want to live well, they wanted to live differently. They are to arrive and depart in their own rail car, to ride a private elevator straight into the hotel lobby, untouched by the crowds. That was the ultimate symbol of status. According to the New York Times in 1929, the Waldorf Astoria was praised as the meeting point of modern architecture and urban convenience. The article described the new hotel as one that would feature a private underground siding for personal rail cars, a place where guests could arrive and depart in complete privacy, away from the busy streets. Blueprints from that era confirmed it. The connection between the Waldorf's basement and the Grand Central lines included both an elevator and a service ramp strong enough to lift freight, even automobiles, up to the surface of Park Avenue. At first, it seemed purely practical, but hidden in that practicality was something deeply New York. A marriage between engineering and elegance, between industry and ambition. Track 61, once an obscure technical line, suddenly became the foundation for a project that connected the mechanical heart of the city to the rising world of luxury above. No one knew that this practical decision would become the start of a legend. It began as a simple function, but it would soon grow into part of New York's mythology, a story of power, secrecy, and hidden doors, an unseen gateway resting beneath the city that never sleeps. At that time, the place was still quiet. No whistles, no passengers, only the ring of hammers, the hiss of welding torches, and the fading heat of steel cooling underground. No one noticed. No one could have guessed that the fate of Track 61 had already begun to turn. 1938. New York City lay beneath a damp, cold autumn morning. Above ground, trains still departed from Grand Central. The sound of iron wheels echoed between the stone walls of Park Avenue. But deep underground, within the tunnels of Lex Yard, a different kind of movement was about to begin. A special railcar was pulled into position. No announcements. No passengers. Only a few security officers and railroad engineers stood in silence. The man they were waiting for was General John J. Pershing. At that time, Pershing was the symbol of American military strength. He had commanded the American Expeditionary Forces in the First World War and held the title of General of the Armies, the highest rank ever granted in the history of the United States military. He visited New York often, but this time his arrival was quiet. No crowds, no cameras, only a hidden passage beneath the Waldorf Astoria. According to records from untapped New York and the New York Times archives in 1938, a private rail car was brought down a ramp that had never been used before. A slope leading directly into the basement beneath the hotel. The lights in the tunnel were dimmed to avoid attention. At midnight, Pershing's small entourage stepped out from the hotel elevator, crossed the concrete hallway, and entered the waiting car. The door closed. A single short whistle echoed. Then the train began to move, slowly merging into Grand Central's underground network. For the first time, the name Track 61 appeared in print. Just one quiet line in the daily news. A special railcar was brought to the siding beneath the Waldorf Astoria for General Pershing. The line went unnoticed, but it marked a turning point. From a simple service track, Track 61 became the first rail line in the city to serve a man of national power. 6 years later, the world was again at war. In 1944, President Franklin D. Roosevelt was serving his fourth term while Europe burned. Polio had weakened his body, and every journey had to be planned with precision. That October, Roosevelt came to New York to deliver a campaign speech. He stayed at the Waldorf Astoria, the shining symbol of prosperous America. And beneath that grand hotel, Track 61 awakened once more. It was the night of October 21st, 1944. The city slept, but the basement of the Waldorf glowed softly in yellow light. Years later, a declassified Secret Service memorandum described the route. The president will depart via the same route he entered, through the New York Central elevators to the rail siding in the basement of the hotel. No one outside the security team and a few technicians were allowed near. A modified baggage car waited silently on Track 61. The elevator doors opened. Roosevelt's car rolled out of the lift and directly into the rail car. It took only minutes. No commands, no flashbulbs, only the quiet click of metal as the wheels settled onto the track. A president left the city the same way he had arrived, quietly, deep beneath Manhattan, in a place where power moved without sound. No official photograph was ever taken that night. However, later accounts from untapped New York and secret NYC told the same story. Roosevelt had used Track 61 as a secret exit, hidden from the public eye in his fragile condition. Some say The old elevator beneath the hotel still carries traces of that journey. There is no certain proof that his limousine was lifted directly to the hotel floor, but technical records confirm that the elevator and track systems were fully capable of doing so. It was the design from 1929, the one that gave the Waldorf its private siding, that made this secret route possible. A perfect underground path for a journey that required absolute discretion. From that night on, Track 61 was no longer just a maintenance line. It became part of the city's whispers. Stories passed between journalists, engineers, and hotel staff. Some said they once felt a faint vibration beneath the Waldorf, while the city above lay asleep. No one saw it, but everyone believed. Those 2 nights, General Pershing in 1938 and President Roosevelt in 1944, lifted Track 61 out of the shadows of machinery. From that point, it became something more. A hidden emblem of Grand Central itself, a passageway reserved for those who once stood at the height of power. The sound of iron wheels from that night has long faded, but somewhere beneath the marble floors of the Waldorf Astoria, a faint vibration still lingers, like the slow, deep breath of a city that never sleeps. As the 20th century came to an end, Track 61 faded from every official record. No one mentioned it. No train stopped there. But it never truly disappeared. Silence kept it alive, in memory and in imagination. And from that silence, stories began to take shape. People spoke of an armored rail car marked MNCW002, which was said to have been designed specifically for President Roosevelt. They said it was heavy, sealed, and built to hide the illness that confined him to a wheelchair. In the decades that followed, that image became legend. The president is leaving Waldorf by underground route. His limousine was resting inside a secret rail car, while New York slept above, unaware. But when historians opened the archives of the New York Central Railroad, a different truth appeared. MNCW002 was not a presidential car. It was a simple baggage car. No seats, no armor, nothing remarkable. Experts from untapped New York confirmed that all the evidence pointed to an ordinary freight car. A simple truth. But memory is never simple. When witnesses fade, and Roosevelt's midnight journey remains only a shadow in old film reels, truth and myth begin to blend. Half made of steel, half made of imagination. Every legend begins with one true detail. And in New York, those details always know how to tell the rest of the story. So it was with the tale of the secret elevator beneath the Waldorf. A hidden lift was said to rise directly from the rail bed to the main lobby. The president's car lifts to the surface, then vanishes behind closed doors. The story spread for decades, part of the Waldorf's legacy. Brilliant above, mysterious below. But the New Yorker, in its 1935 issue, told it differently. It was written that Waldorf's service elevator opened onto Park Avenue, which was meant only for freight and equipment, not for guests. A small detail, a true one, but easily forgotten. Because truth, after all, is rarely as beautiful as myth. When the records fall silent, memory begins to speak. And from a simple service lift, the elevator became a symbol of secrecy, a doorway for those who walked between light and the quiet depths of power. Then the war ended. Those who had once stepped onto the cold platform of Track 61 were gone, but the track itself never slept. At the dawn of the 21st century, in a world filled with uncertainty, its name surfaced once again. Reports claimed that the rail line beneath the Waldorf Astoria was being prepared as an emergency escape route for the American delegation during the United Nations Summit in 2003. No one confirmed it. No one denied it. But the thought of a hidden exit in the middle of Manhattan felt too perfect not to believe. Secret NYC wrote, "If there is any place deep enough, hidden enough, to conceal an entire train, it would be beneath the Waldorf." The rumor spread quickly. It appeared in city tours, in articles about hidden New York, and each time the story was told again, Track 61 came back to life. All of these stories shared something in common. They were built from fragments of truth. A baggage car marked 002, an elevator opening onto Park Avenue, a real stretch of track beneath the Waldorf Astoria. And when those fragments met the imagination of a city that never sleeps, they formed a single story. Half truth, half belief. In New York, secrets do not need proof. They only need to be told. Track 61 exists between two worlds, between the record of engineering and the dream of the city, between history and rumor. It needs no train to run, no light to shine. It survives through memory. If you stand on Park Avenue, just outside the Waldorf late at night, you might see nothing but the glow of passing headlights on the street. But if you wait a little longer and listen, you might hear something else. Faint, deep, like the last breath of the city beneath your feet. A pulse under the ground, a whisper made of steel. Track 61 is still there, silent, resting, but never gone. After the Second World War, New York began to change its skin. The city entered the age of glass towers, electric light, and car horns echoing through the night. Grand Central Terminal, once the beating symbol of the railroad era, still stood proud in Midtown, but its purpose had shifted. As aeroplanes began to claim the skies and highways stretched far into the suburbs, the trains that once carried the soul of Manhattan grew fewer and fewer. And with that slow fading rhythm, beneath the marble and stone, Track 61 fell silent too. Once it had served the most powerful people in the world. Now it returned to its original function, a storage track. No lights, no passengers, only damp walls, metallic dust, and a slow chill drifting through the air. Some said that, at night, a faint vibration could still be felt from deep below, perhaps the echo of a maintenance train passing through, or maybe just the wind slipping through forgotten vents. For most New Yorkers, Track 61 had disappeared completely. It was no longer shown on operational maps, no longer included in tours of Grand Central. But beneath Manhattan's layers of steel and concrete, it remained, silent but enduring. Grand Central itself began to change. Some areas were abandoned. Certain tunnels were sealed to save on maintenance costs. The city looked upward to new landmarks: the Empire State Building, the Chrysler, the Pan Am Tower. The old symbols faded under neon light and the rush of modern life. But deep below, meters beneath the city's surface, Track 61 kept its shape. Rust on the rails, cracks in the concrete walls, faded technical markings are barely visible through time. No one knew exactly when the last train passed through. Perhaps in the late 1950s, when the Waldorf Astoria stopped using its underground siding. From then on, the entrance was locked. Only a few maintenance workers knew the way. To them, it was nothing more than an old part of the infrastructure. A dark corridor filled with the smell of oil and the sound of dry air. But for those who knew the stories of Roosevelt and the secret trains, the name Track 61 still carried a strange weight, a secret buried but never gone. Then came the 1960s. New York entered another era. Popular culture exploded. Contemporary art began to seep into every corner of the city. Old buildings, warehouses, and even basements became stages for creativity. And one night, in 1965, in the restless pulse of Manhattan, the name Track 61 was spoken again, for the last time, in the light. The one who revived it was Andy Warhol, the icon of pop art, the man who turned soup cans and Marilyn Monroe's face into the language of an age. Warhol did not choose a museum or a gallery for his event. He chose the second basement beneath the Waldorf Astoria, the old rail space once reserved for world leaders. That night, Track 61 lit up again, not with train lights, but with the glow of projectors, film reels, and camera flashes. Music thundered through the underground space. Voices mingled, artists, socialites, and the curious who wanted to step inside a place few had ever seen. In that cold, low-ceilinged chamber, all created something surreal, half art, half dream. They called it the Party 2 Stories under the Waldorf Astoria. The night stretched until dawn. Images of the modern city flickered across the concrete walls. Wheels, steel frames, and electrical cables became the backdrop for a living canvas of light. People danced, laughed, drank, took photos, and spoke of the strange beauty found in decay. For the first time in years, Track 61 seemed to breathe again. Not through the rumble of trains, but through the rhythm of human voices. For Warhol, it was a bridge between modernity and memory, a way to turn a symbol of power into a space of freedom. A place that once carried secrets of the elite now reflected the faces of ordinary people in its old metallic walls. That party was never held again. When it ended, Track 61 fell silent once more. The lights dimmed. The music dissolved into the air. Only the hollow echo of the tunnel remained. Warhol left, leaving behind a faint mark in the story of New York art. From that moment, Track 61 was no longer just part of Grand Central. It had become a symbol, a crossroads where history, power, and art once met. After 1965, almost no one was allowed down there again. The Waldorf Astoria continued to live above, welcoming guests, hosting galas. But below, the door to Track 61 was sealed. Gradually, it became an empty space in the city's memory, a place people spoke of but never saw. Maintenance workers from Grand Central sometimes passed near it during inspections. They said they could hear the wind whistling through old pipes, sometimes a faint metallic ring. Some believed it was only the echo from other tracks. Others said it was the lingering sound of that night with Warhol, music still clinging to the walls, refusing to fade. Track 61 became a remnant, not of engineering, but of memory, a forgotten fragment of an age that once believed human beings could touch their deepest truths beneath the earth. After the war, as the city reached higher into the sky, this place remained below, in darkness, like the second layer of New York's memory. No one can say how much of it still survives. Perhaps the rails have rusted, the walls have decayed. Some passages may already be sealed, but whenever the name Waldorf Astoria is spoken, a few still remember. 2 floors beneath its marble halls, there was once a space that came alive in an era of change. A party, a track, and a city that never stopped breathing. Then silence, only the echo of metal sinking back into the earth. After Andy Warhol's party in 1965, Track 61 fell silent again. The industrial lights went dark. The music dissolved into cold concrete. No one ever hosted another event beneath that basement. The entrance was left behind, buried in dust and iron air. Only a handful of Grand Central engineers were still allowed to visit. Short, quiet inspections every few years. Track 61 returned to darkness. It vanished from operational maps. It disappeared from technical records, as if it had never existed, except in the memory of those who had once heard its name. From time to time, independent journalists mentioned it again. Small columns buried in the urban legends section of New York papers. To most people, Track 61 became just that, a whisper, a rumor of a secret tunnel someone once claimed to have seen, but no one could ever prove. In the 1970s and 80s, as Grand Central regained its historical importance, a few film crews and architecture students were granted permission to descend into the lower levels. They said that under the Waldorf Astoria, they saw a line of rusted tracks, a thick steel door with silver paint flaking away, and behind it, a darkness so deep that even flashlights couldn't find the end. Just a few accounts, but enough to make Track 61 breathe again in the imagination of a generation enchanted by the city's mysteries. Then came the 1990s. Unofficial underground tours began to appear, unlicensed, unadvertised. Architecture lovers and history enthusiasts followed self-appointed guides through narrow maintenance corridors until they stopped before a door. No one was allowed to go inside. But standing there, in front of that cold metal, people said they could feel it. Another layer of New York. The part that sleeps under its own skin. The part that still breathes slowly. In the early 2000s, a few blurry photos appeared on old forums. A dim frame showing half a tunnel door. A line of yellow light spilling out like the last trace of memory. No one knew when the picture was taken, but it was shared thousands of times. People argued, commented, and imagined. And with every retelling, Track 61 drifted further from reality, closer to legend. Above ground, the Waldorf Astoria remained radiant. Guests arrived. Parties glittered. Life continued. But no one spoke about the space beneath it. In renovation plans, that section was marked by a single phrase, "Not in use." And so, Track 61 stayed silent, living in the dark, but never dead. Then came the age of the internet. Websites like Atlas Obscura, Untapped New York, and Abandoned NYC began to tell their story again. Track 61 was called one of the most fascinating underground secrets of Manhattan. Articles described its structure, quoted old documents, and always repeated the same line: closed to the public. That single phrase made people talk about it even more. A few photographers received special access to enter. They said that when the steel door opened, dust, metal, and cold air rushed out all at once. Their flashlights swept over curved, rusted rails and paint peeling like the skin of time. In the distance, a single yellow bulb hung from the ceiling. It flickered once, then went out, leaving a thick, heavy darkness that seemed to swallow sound itself. If you stood still long enough, they said you could hear something faint. Maybe a tremor. Maybe the hush of an old elevator closing. No one knew if it was real or imagined. But everyone agreed on one thing. Track 61 was not entirely asleep. Today, it survives only through the hidden New York tours. Journeys that never reach the tunnel, but stop before the door. The guide tells the story. The audience listens. And in that moment, among the city's noise, they feel a different kind of silence. The kind that exists only underground, where the sound of time is no longer sharp, but distant, like an echo. Some writers still speak of Track 61 as a symbol of the old New York, not just of concrete and steel, but of memory, because this place holds two layers of time. One belongs to power long gone, the other to silence that endures. On one side, the bright lights of Warhol's party. On the other hand, there is cold air and iron dust. Between the two, Track 61 still exists, a thin line between what the city remembers and what it forgets. If you could descend into the tunnel today, you would find it much the same. The rusted rails, the faded streaks of silver paint, a single yellow bulb swaying above. Sometimes it flickers, the final reflex of a memory that refuses to die. Then darkness again. Stillness. Only the chill air moving along the concrete walls and the faint echo of an old elevator somewhere far away. Track 61 is no longer a place for trains or for people. It belongs to the city itself, a lingering heartbeat of its golden age. The steel door remains closed, but inside, the sound is still there. Slow, steady, like the heartbeat of New York, deep beneath the ground. The truth is, no secret in New York ever stays completely in the dark. When Track 61 is seen through old blueprints and archives of the Waldorf Astoria, it reveals itself not as a secret station for presidents, but simply as a service track. It was a clever design, built to support the technical work of Grand Central Terminal. Yet its location, directly beneath one of the most luxurious hotels in the world, gave it a different kind of life, a private doorway for those who needed to move unseen. In truth, Track 61 was never special. No grand hall, no ticket counter, no sign or waiting light, only cold rails, a long sloping ramp, and an industrial elevator strong enough to lift a car to the street above. But in certain moments of history, when General Pershing left New York at midnight, or when Roosevelt needed to move without eyes upon him, this small stretch of track became exactly what it was meant to be. Not often, but just enough to turn a technical detail into a legend. The ordinary became extraordinary because it appeared in the right place at the right time. Like every urban legend, what keeps Track 61 alive is not what it truly is, but what people imagine around it. In a city that never sleeps, where every building carries its own past, people need shadows to dream into. They need a tunnel to believe that beneath their feet, another world still moves. They need a secret passage to remind them that even power must sometimes pass through darkness. Maybe we all need a little mystery to make reality feel real. Because the secret of Track 61 has never been about hiding or deception. It is about how this city was built. New York was made in layers. A layer of light, a layer of silence, a layer of facades, and a layer behind the scenes. Track 61 is just one small piece within that vast design. A practical creation made for work that human imagination turned into myth. And that is the nature of New York. A city where truth and symbol always walk together. Every structure, no matter how functional, carries the chance to become a metaphor. Track 61 is one of those metaphors. It stands for the parallel lines running beneath Manhattan, the quiet veins under hurried footsteps, where power and secrecy flow unseen. Just like life itself, beneath the bright surface of ambition, there are still depths that move everything forward, even when no one notices. Track 61 is not only about a place, it is about how a city exists. A city sustained by the balance of noise and stillness, of chaos and calm. When people search for it, they are not really looking for a track. They are looking for a feeling. That even in the center of a restless metropolis, something remains untouched by time. A place with no name, missing from every map, but still alive. A fragment of the old New York, breathing quietly beneath the new. Modern writers have tried to explain Track 61. They say it was never truly a presidential station. And yet, in explaining it, They made it more fascinating, because when a mystery is revealed, what remains is not disappointment, but understanding. What draws us in is not what is hidden, but the knowing that something is. Maybe Roosevelt never boarded a train from that tunnel. Maybe his armored car was never lifted by that old elevator. But that doesn't change what it means. If anything, it's the thin line between truth and imagination that keeps it alive, not as a monument, but as a living breath in the culture of the city. Every generation of New Yorkers sees Track 61 in its own way. Warhol's generation turned it into a stage for art. The next turned it into a stop on secret tours. And today, it is a symbol of longing, a reminder of when people believed that extraordinary things could happen underground. Track 61 is New York's mirror. Look into it, and you see both light and shadow, memory and presence, the sound of the world above, and the silence of the world below. It reminds us that every city has two faces, one for the public, and one for the stories that never need to be told. When the last light in the tunnel fades, what echoes back is not conspiracy, not the rumble of trains, not the shadow of power. It is the slow breath of a city that once needed secret paths, a breath that is slow, deep, and quiet. It was as if New York itself were telling its own story, a story without an ending, only echoes. Track 61, a track with no trains, still runs through the city's memory, where past and present meet, in silence, beneath the ground. A century has passed. The rails beneath the Waldorf Astoria have lain still all that time. When New York was built from steel and steam, no one could have imagined that in the heart of Manhattan, a single hidden track would carry the memory of power, architecture, and time itself. Track 61 is still there, buried between earth, steel, and darkness. A quiet artery inside the vast body of Grand Central. A slow heartbeat, pulsing beneath the marble floors of the Waldorf. Today, above ground, the hotel shines once again. But deep below, the steel door remains closed, untouched, unforgotten. It is as if the city itself has chosen to keep a breath of silence, a secret it is not yet ready to wake. Some say it is only a service track. Others believe it is an escape route, preserved for a moment no one can predict. But whatever it is, Track 61 gives the city a strange kind of comfort. A piece of its past is still resting quietly beneath the restless pavement of Lexington Avenue. If you stop there at night, in front of the Waldorf's facade, you may hear nothing, only the wind. But sometimes, very faintly, you might feel a vibration, like the breath of time itself, still there, beneath the ground. History never truly sleeps. It whispers beneath the streets, and if you listen slowly enough, you may hear it. The soft touch of an old train against the night, a sound small, distant, but real. Track 61, still there, silent, but never gone.